Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, the 2018 Identity Report, the identity industry's first benchmark. I'm Kirby Roscoe, and I'll be your moderator today. Today's webinar is in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions throughout the event, go ahead and submit them into the Q&A panel, and we will answer them during our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded, and we will email you a link to the recorded version tomorrow. Joining us today is Chad Walcott, Senior Vice President of Services for Identropy, a leader in innovation consulting services for the identity governance and administration market. Chad has well over a decade of experience deploying market-leading IAM solutions for well over 200 customers across the globe and virtually every industry vertical. Prior to joining Identropy, Chad held the position of Vice President of Global Services at Corian Corporation, where he was responsible for leading the professional services, customer support, and education functions. He brings nearly 2 decades of enterprise software consulting with technical and executive management experience. With a focus on driving organizational transformation, Chad has a record of service delivery excellence and business growth throughout strong team leadership, high-impact consulting, and operational management. Also joining us today is Ruben Brahm, Senior Director of Field Programs here at SailPoint. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Ruben to start our presentation.
Thank you, Kirby. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. Today's business is constantly evolving, bringing new opportunities as well as new risks, from technology advancements to new compliance mandates. Enterprises need to evolve. A user-centric security strategy can help organizations to properly govern their users and their access to corporate resources. To gauge where enterprises are in the process of putting identity at the center of this strategy, the Identity Score self-assessment evaluated how effective their organization's current identity programs are. Each respondent received a personalized report based on their score, which is much like a credit score, with recommendations on how to improve their identity efforts. The good news is from these responses, we found over half of the enterprises do have a formal identity program. So, organizations are starting to understand the importance of an evolution required in today's security strategies. However, we also found that many organizations are lacking maturity in the identity processes. Let's dig into more of what our analysis found. We received more than 450 responses of these assessments from over the globe. 65% of these were US-based and 35% international. Half of these were from organizations with employee size above 10,000 employees, and half of them were between 1,000 to 10,000 employees. So, in order to gauge better where as a whole enterprises are today with identity, and to further assist those who took the survey, SailPoint has created and launched the first comprehensive identity benchmark report based on the responses. From the initial responses from over 450 people, we found some really interesting results with regards to how enterprises are handling their identity governance program. First, let's look at the scores. Half of the respondents scored in an expected range average, with a slight skew on the remaining half towards the bottom end of the scale. The mean score was 493, just above the median and the total score range. So what does this score mean, actually? 493 or any score there in the range. It's the identity score each respondent received after finishing a questionnaire. Respondents were scored on a scale from 100 to 850, very much like a credit score in the US, and it denotes the possible risk level of the organization based on those survey questions. In addition to their score, respondents were also given a personalized report with further information as well as recommendations to improve. But as helpful as the individual scores are, they don't paint an entire picture and tell the entire story. After analyzing all the answers to the questions, the main takeaway was clear. Organizations have identity-shaped holes in their security. Now we looked at what does that mean, and we'll present three major findings and three major themes from those. The first one, theme number one, is support for identity programs has room for improvement. Organizations are still maturing their control over identities. And the third and final theme is that data is everywhere, but it's unmonitored and unmanaged. Let's delve in a bit more and drill in and understand what does that mean, each one of those themes, and share a bit of the findings that are very, very interesting on each one of those themes. Looking at the first one, which is support for identity programs has room for improvement, we found 54% of the organizations have an official identity program. That's good to understand, but when we analyze it a bit further, we see that they are not supporting it with the right policies and procedures. However, the lack of identity program across organizations is not a US-based problem or an international problem, it's a global problem. Across the board, we found very similar results, with 52% of the international respondents having an identity program and 55% of the US respondents. Now, when we go to understand a bit more into the details and to see what is happening there, the lack of support for these programs that exist is concerning. We find that around 9 in 10 organizations do not have a fully automated identity processes. Just 13% of organizations have fully automated password management. And the numbers are even smaller, single digit, for other critical identity processes. As you can see, 7% for access requests, 6% for recertification, and 8% for provisioning. And in that, less than half of provisioning is automated. Moving on to the second key finding and theme that we found from the report. Organizations are still maturing their control over identity. Amid the troubling statistics, it is important that some organizations have hit some important milestones. As we see, 3 in 10 organizations can produce a full user access report upon request. The same number have set up full role model for their users. Looking at this a bit, when we dissect this into the kind of enterprise size, we find that in the bigger enterprises, it is harder for enterprises to see everything. 74% of them could not produce a full report on user access, compared to 67% of users with fewer than 10,000 users in the enterprise. In achieving the all-important goal of being able to see everything that is going on in an organization, most respondents stated that they were currently unable to do so. While the numbers may seem small for those who have no visibility at all, the fact that there are organizations with no visibility over their users' access to corporate resources paints a very bleak picture for these organizations' security. Moving on to the third theme that we found out and the third finding, Data is everywhere, but it is unmonitored and unmanaged. There is very little visibility or ownership over corporate data. As we shared at the beginning of the webinar, a survey found only 1 in 10 organizations monitor and govern access to all their data, a mere 9%. At the other end of the spectrum, 18% of respondents reported their organization don't monitor or govern their data, leaving a larger portion of the population unsecured. A major component of securing organizational data is identifying who owns it. But about half of organizations do not have owners for either their structured or their unstructured data. This poses a particular problem as many don't know what data they have, what pieces contain sensitive information, and how to control access to it. As we can see, 55% of the structured data have a signed owner, and only 41% of the unstructured data have assigned owners. This is discomforting. Sensitive data is being left unowned. We can see that 1 in 3 organizations have unowned financial data. To illustrate further, we can find 42% of personal employee information is unowned. 13% of healthcare records are also unowned in organizations. These are a few highlights and examples of the data being unowned. With organizations having, on average, only proper owners for about half of their data, this leaves much of the data without protection. So, what could we do about it? How can we resolve it? What are the steps we are going to take? For that, I will hand it over to Chad from Identropy.
Great, thank you, Ruben. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do about these issues that came out of this report. Before we jump into that, let's come back to the 3 themes that Ruben shared based on the report data. First is the challenge of building support for your identity programs. Second, organizational maturity challenges specific to controlling the identities. And finally, data. It's everywhere, and we can see from the report that it's not being governed effectively. Building organizational support for an identity program is critical to that program's long-term success. Now, we can see from the report results that while many organizations have started down the identity program road, few have reached full automation across any of the key services of identity: password management, access request, recertification or access review, and provisioning. One of the reasons we see many programs fail or never realize their full benefits is because people look at identity as a point-in-time project to address a specific pain area. The reality that people don't realize is that identity is hard. Undertaking an identity program is going to force you to deal with a number of organizational, technical, and often political challenges. You'll surely uncover things about your own organization that you don't even know. And ultimately, you need to understand your customer, the business. As we've seen time and time again, much like this example, if you make it hard for the users, they will find ways around it. From a security and compliance perspective, the game is always changing. It seems as though the list of regulations just keeps getting longer and longer every year, which means that you need to be nimble and adjust your program to match the needs of your particular business and industry. Over the past 15 years, we've been working with organizations across the globe to plan, build, and run identity programs. Throughout that time, we've collected a tremendous amount of experience, having seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. As an outcome of those experiences, we've identified the top 10 pitfalls of identity and access management. These pitfalls, or more specifically avoiding these pitfalls, really gets to the heart of building support and ultimately success for your journey. The top 4 here speak to the critical factors you need to address to build that cross-organizational support. As I mentioned earlier, the game is always changing. IAM is a program, not simply a point-in-time project to address a pain area like birthright provisioning automation. Your program must be able to adjust with the needs of the business and the demands of the security industry as a whole. Identity is often a political battle, so having a strong executive sponsor to help break through roadblocks and build consensus across the business is critical. Third, IAM is not simply about screwing in a piece of technology. You need to plan appropriately, build a roadmap, and revisit it regularly to ensure that you're driving success and adjusting course as needed. Finally, identity isn't a simple security project or an IT initiative. You need to engage stakeholders from across the organization to create champions and help drive continued successes. The best programs involve stakeholders from every part of an organization, ensuring that everyone is rowing in the same direction. To build support for an identity program, it's important to understand the key drivers for your organization. Each one and each industry vertical is different, but there are generally 3 driving factors behind undertaking a program like this. First is a traditional security-focused driver, risk management and mitigation. Second, the focus on IT efficiency and optimization, on how to automate processes. And finally, business enablement. This is an area we see more and more common as a driver for an identity program, providing self-service capabilities, enhanced user experiences to support the demands of a changing business landscape. Interestingly, though, we do see some commonalities based on different industries. For example, financial services and healthcare tends to lean towards compliance and security, focusing on the risk driver. In the retail space, they tend to lean more towards usability and security, which is really a combination of business enablement and risk management. On the manufacturing side, it's really focused on cost and efficiency, putting them squarely in the automation category. It's important for you to match your internal messaging and communications to support your key driving factors to help build that consensus and support across your organization. Once you understand your driving factors, you can determine the best path to leverage your organization's focus to achieve the desired value. The most common approaches to these programs follow the history of the IAM industry. Some begin with provisioning and automation. With a focus on productivity and efficiency, the value proposition is centered around the automation of IT functions to enable things like day one productivity and an improved user experience that comes along with the self-service capabilities. Alternatively, we have the governance-led approach. This approach focuses on controls and security, allowing you to first understand who has access to what. The added benefit of this approach is the ability to facilitate cleaning up your environment, finding and eliminating things like orphaned accounts, and addressing over-credentialing. This can also enable you to accelerate automation capabilities down the road. The most successful programs combine these two in a hybrid approach. Mixing provisioning and governance-led approaches into this hybrid implementation model provides you with the best of both worlds, allowing you to quickly understand who has access to what, integrate your key applications, and start cleaning up your infrastructure. Mitigate your risk by controlling access to the gates, automating termination processes to ensure timely removal of access, doing things like scheduling access reviews to validate the appropriate level of access for your employee and non-employee populations. And finally, now that the foundation has been built, you can expand upon your breadth of applications, your business processes, and as necessary, incorporate additional user populations. The key to the long-term success and ongoing support for your program is to focus on incremental progress versus delayed perfection. Gone are the days of bringing in a piece of software and a team of consultants, spending a year or two in the bunker developing that solution, The business changes too quickly to do that now. Knowing who has access to what is a foundational element of an identity program. Make sure your plan addresses the needs first. The whipped cream and cherry can come after the cake has been baked. It's also important to promote your wins early and often. Try to plan for a win of some sort at least every 3 months. They don't always have to be big or public wins to provide value to your organization. Behind the scenes wins, like being able to tell the CISO that you can now accurately tell who has access to a sensitive file share, is still valuable. The second theme from the report is all about maturity. We can see that few organizations have achieved full visibility into user access, and even fewer understand where their critical data even is. Alarmingly, 7% of the respondent organizations have no visibility into user access, and 6 have no visibility into their data. The key to addressing your organizational maturity starts with understanding your organization. According to a Forrester report from back in 2016, IAM projects are 70% people, process, politics, communications, and training. Only 30% is technology. But many organizations just go out and buy technology based on the promise of fixing the problem that they have. Before you can drive maturity across your program, you really need to understand where you are today. Assessing your current maturity and capabilities across the broader identity spectrum is critical to building a roadmap and driving that long-term success. Once you understand where you are, you can determine where you want to be over time. No organization is going to achieve a level 5 maturity across all key areas of identity. No one has that kind of time and money. That said, it's critical for you to understand what level of maturity is appropriate for you and build a plan to get there. Finally, the third theme, data is everywhere. Data breaches are the new normal. It seems like almost daily a story pops up about a data breach somewhere. No industry is immune from this. And when we speak to executives across the globe, there's a common message. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I was encouraged, though, to see the report data that showed almost 10% of the respondents feel they have a robust data governance program, but almost 20% haven't even begun to address data. A key step in governing your data, whether it be structured or unstructured, is understanding who owns that data, who are your data stewards. We can see from the report that more progress has been made on the structured front, which is to be expected. By its nature, that data is easier to understand and manage. Unfortunately, it's the unstructured data where we see the explosive data growth. Some experts estimate that 80 to 90% of data in the enterprise is unstructured. And we're really not helping ourselves here. The problem of data is increasing every day. Each day, organizations are adding new users through inorganic hiring or more inorganic means such as mergers and acquisitions. When you add to that the exponential increase of data across the enterprise that happens every single day, that combination just continues to increase your risk. A traditional identity program will help you address some data governance challenges by controlling access to data repositories and ensuring your user population has the right access to the right resources. But to really provide the necessary governance of data, you need to first understand where your data resides. Once you know where it is, you need to understand what types of data are important to your organization. Some could be tied directly to regulatory considerations like SOX, PCI, or GDPR. Now that you've found your data and you know what data is important, you need to determine who should be responsible for that data. That data owner can then assist in understanding and defining policies around access to the data and ensuring you have the appropriate level of governance controls applied. And then finally, monitoring that data. Understanding when data is accessed and by whom enables you to ensure your governance controls are effective and respond quickly to any anomalous activity. To wrap up, let's identify a couple of key takeaways. First, build support by understanding the needs of your business and focusing on enabling, not just securing. As I mentioned before, this isn't just a security or an IT automation efficiency initiative. The most successful identity programs involve business enablement. How can you make it easier for your users and your business and still apply the appropriate securities? Second, take the time to understand where your organization is from a maturity perspective. Figure out where you need to be, and then build a plan to get there over time. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to be everything to everyone. And finally, get control of your data. Find it, own it, and secure it. Kirby, back over to you for any questions.
Thanks, Chad, for an informative and very insightful presentation. We have a few questions coming in. The first one is, where can I find the report to download for myself?
Okay, I'll take that one. So basically, one, you can find it on our website, www.sailpoint.com, and we'll also send a copy to everybody attending this webinar. And if you want to also take the security assessment for your personal enterprise and organization, you can also do so, and you will get a very personalized and customized assessment for your enterprise on the SailPoint website.
Thanks, Ruben. Our next question is, why is automation such an important part of a good identity program?
I can take that one. So automation is important for a couple of different reasons. One, it's really a key business value. It really helps to build that support and to drive the return on investment that organizations look for this. It eliminates manually intensive tasks like extracting access control lists and correlating those accesses to actual people. So it streamlines those processes. It also removes the human factor. In many cases, the introduction of people into the process can create errors. So the more you can automate there, the more effectively that issue is removed. Inherently, the automation provides auditability and reporting of those access changes over time, and ultimately allows you to enable your IT and security staff to focus on higher value initiatives where their expertise is better utilized rather than just the mechanical, manually intensive tasks that are required.
Thanks, Chad. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time to the Q&A panel. Our next question is, how should we start the process of identifying owners for our data?
I can answer that one as well. So as we talked about, data is everywhere. It's a big challenge for all organizations, whether it's structured or unstructured data. As I mentioned, one of the keys to this is understanding where your data resides. That doesn't require tools or technology to do that, although there are technologies out there that make that easier. But understanding where your data is the first step. Once you understand that, you can start to look into things like who is accessing that data most frequently and collaborate with that individual or that group. Alternatively, you may look at the data itself to understand what purpose it serves and identify the most likely consumers and start there. Again, working with those resources to understand who should be the owner of that.
Thanks, Chad. And we have a question coming in. How does AI play in the automation? I assume in the automation of identity.
Sure, I can take that. So AI is starting to become a term that is used everywhere. I think when you look at automation, there's lots of different facets of automation, and I think part of what AI can allow you to tackle is really looking at the volume of data and the volume of activity that's going on and try to make smarter decisions. So one great example that many organizations want to be able to get to, and I think we're close to being able to get there, is leveraging AI to be able to inform your role-based access control models and being able to understand not only who has access, but what are they doing with that access. The more you can automate and build logic around evaluating that, the easier the overall identity processes are going to flow. There should be less manual steps. There should be less people getting involved in having to make those decisions. But that'll come over time.
And to add to that, Chad, also SailPoint has launched the Identity AI, and that will be available more broader in the U.S. For GA in the Q2 of 2019, and then a bit later in Europe and APAC.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So everyone, just please keep an eye out for an email tomorrow that will include the report as well as the recording for today's webinar. In the report, you'll be able to dive deeper and share with interested colleagues. If you'd like to learn more, please contact us using the information on your screen, and we'll get you in touch with an identity representative. Chad and Ruben, thank you so much for your presentation, and thanks to everyone who joined us today on the line. Enjoy the rest of your day.